Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a video for you on a drawing I did last night. Um, I was asked recently on one of my videos if I could draw a raven after I asked you guys for requests on what I should draw next. So I was like, oh, okay, a raven. I've drawn ravens before a long time ago. And I remembered there was one drawing that I really liked that I did a while back of a girl, like a bust from chest up of a girl with a raven on her shoulders. And I was like, oh, maybe I could redraw that. And I went back and I looked at it and, ooh, I do not like the way it looks anymore. I definitely am happy that I improved from this image, and this was only in 2018, so not too long ago. It's definitely nice to see some improvement in my drawings over time. It's really cool. It's like I actually am getting somewhere. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, you know? But I'm very happy with the way this turned out. So I kind of did a draw this again for a few years later. Anyway, I am just starting out with a sketch here, just a quick base sketch. I only use one brush for pretty much all of my drawings, and I use the same brush for everything from the sketch all the way to coloring and finishing and final details and everything. I just increase and decrease the size of the brush depending on what I'm doing. So if I'm doing a sketch or fine line art, I'll make the brush size very small, and same for fine details. But if I want to blend and color, I'll make the brush very large. If you click up top here, I'm leaving a link for a video that explains what the settings are for my brushes, and also there's a download link in the description if you want to download it. Anyway, like I said, I'm just laying down a sketch with that brush. That brush that I mentioned is a modified canvas roller brush, by the way. It's literally just the canvas roller brush. Or, sorry, not canvas roller brush. I always say that. I don't know why I call it the canvas roller brush. It's not a canvas. It's the clay roller brush. But I just enabled pressure sensitivity so that the pressure that you put down determines the size of the brush, and also the opacity as well. So that makes the drawing a little bit more dynamic. And just finishing up laying down the foundation of the sketch here. This is going to be another longer video. Hope you guys like the longer ones. Somebody said that they liked them, and I know a couple people told me that they like to draw along with my videos, so I hope if you're drawing with me, I'm giving you some inspiration. I know I used to do this when I was younger and first starting out with digital art. I used to watch people draw on YouTube, but they never really talked. Nobody ever really talked. They just played like techno music and stuff, which I guess I play in the background anyway. So anyway, I laid down a layer underneath that sketch layer, and I just put down a lighter purple than the sketch color I used. And now I'm going in with various shades of pinkish oranges and purpley pinks and lighter pinks, and I'm kind of doing a gradient of her skin from light to darker, so that it looks like there's light shining on the right side of her body. And then I'm adding in some dark purple for her clothing and just filling that in underneath the sketch layer, as I said. And then I'm using a slightly lighter purple and I'm blending it back and forth. That brush that I'm using, the clay roller, blends when you have a very big size, so it makes it easier. I'm blocking in a dark purple for the raven and a more vibrant deep purple for her hair. That's gonna look really cool when it's done. Just laying in those base colors and adding a little lighter shading to the raven. And now I'm gonna go in with some darker colors and add in some actual lines to define the clear edges of her eyes and her nose and her lips and the edges of her face, and basically all of the dark defined areas that I want to separate edges in a definite way. That's where I go in with the darkened colors. And I sample the colors around from the rest of the drawing that I've already laid down with my color picker so that it blends in with what I've already put down and doesn't look out of place, too dark or too light. And I'm just cleaning up the sketch and making it look more refined. Oh, I love Infinite Painter. I swear, I definitely think that I've become a better artist with Infinite Painter. And not only that, I started using Infinite Painter on my Samsung Galaxy. Oh, what was my old? No, I had a Samsung Note 8 phone. That's what it was. And that has that little pen, and it's a pretty big screen for a phone, but it's kind of hard to draw on, to be honest, when you're used to a tablet. So I was drawing on that for a while, and that's where I found Infinite Painter, and I loved it, and it was so fun to work with. And then I got a Samsung Galaxy Tab S6, and oh my god, I swear I got so much better at drawing. Just from having a bigger screen again and finally be able to use Infinite Painter on a larger area. Oh my god, I swear this program has changed so much for me. Like, I've been able to do blending and stuff like that with programs like Paint Tool Sai, but for some reason, the way that this one blends a little bit more randomly with the brush that I use, but like also is still very controllable. I don't know why it opened up like a new door for me in my mind and made it work more like real paint in my head, I guess. Anyway, you can see that I am basically going about this in a process like I always do with these rough cartoony sketches, where I block in big blobs of color behind the sketch, and then I go back in and I paint in the lines around that rough sketch, and then I kind of paint over the rough areas and smooth them out with a larger size brush and make it look more cleaned up. You can see I'm lining out the edges of the arm there. And I think at this point I just merged everything into one layer because I wasn't really worried about dealing with multiple layers after this point. The only reason that I even work with multiple layers in these kind of style of cartoony drawings is just because it makes laying down that initial base sketch easier when I want to lay down some base value as well, if that makes sense. I like to just blob that down, and that's a good advantage of digital art, is that you can just blob down a really quick valued base sketch very fast with layers. But a lot of the times I just go in and I paint all on one layer, and I don't even really do that. But when I'm doing this kind of style of drawing, I like to start with layers and then merge it all into one at the end, when I've got the sketch how I want it and I'm ready to go in and actually detail things and clean them up. And the reason that I like to merge everything into one layer is because I don't know if it's like this with other tablets, but the Samsung Galaxy Tab does well with less layers, and I like to keep it down to one or two and preferably 1, because it keeps it running nice and smooth. And then I can use larger canvas sizes in the 3000 to 4000 pixel range if I want, as long as I'm keeping it down to a couple layers. Like, I had no more than 3 layers at a time with this drawing, and then that was only in the beginning, and then I merged it down to 1 at this point, and I didn't add any more after this. You can see how I'm just adding in darker lines to outline everything and separate the hair from the body. And I'm sampling the colors around to blend in the areas where I might have overdrawn a line and it looks weird. I'll go back in and I'll sample the color from the hair and I'll paint back over that line and make it smaller, and I'll make it less rough. And that's kind of what I do here and there all around the drawing to clean it up. Just finishing the lines on the pants. Making sure that the hemline is visible here by adding at a darker edge around the lip. And I'm lining in the little creases in her pants. A lot of the times when I do creases, I'll do these little V shapes for the creases, and then I'll scribble in a little shading just at the point of the V shape and fade it out to the 2 tops of the V, if that makes sense. It makes a little crease crevice, so you can make it look like a crease in a fabric really easily. And I'm doing the same thing on the glove there. In this picture, I decided to have her holding the bird with her hand. And obviously she's going to need a glove because those talons are going to be sharp. And here I'm going to start working with the raven. And I definitely had to look at a reference photo for this one. If you noticed in the beginning of the drawing, when I was sketching out the base sketch, I was having a bit of a hard time figuring out what I wanted the raven to look like and how I wanted it to be positioned. And I was kind of trying to go off of memory of how I thought a raven should look in my head. And I'm going against my own rules. And I always kind of switch my brain on and off into remembering. Don't remember what a raven looks like if you are having a hard time drawing. Sometimes I can get into this like flow where I remember what certain animals look like because I've drawn them so many times. But it's been a while since I've tried a raven, so me just winging it was not working out. It's fine to just sketch down the shapes at first if you don't look at something, but I had to go back and actually check out a reference and see what they looked like, because it wasn't exactly looking right. And there, I just glob this in with lighter and darker purples, and I use pure white for that shiniest part on the eye there to make it look really reflective. I'm going back and forth with the lighter and darker values of purple. And I'm kind of going off my reference for how I shaded the beak just to make it look a little bit more realistic. But I didn't really base this exactly off of a reference. I just wanted to look and make sure that the face looked right and that the body shape was correct. And you can see the way that I do feathers is kind of similar to fur and hair. I kind of just treat fur and hair and feathers, especially in this style, in a way that where I'm just kind of drawing globs, like the values and the shading. I treat the hair and the feathers like it's one big blob, and it's like a solid object, and it's not made of tiny hairs. And I shade it and value it as one big solid object and shape. And then I go back in and I draw like a few lines here and there, and I focus on the negative space of those few lines here and there to like bring out the detail of like the impression of a feather or the impression of some fur here and there. And then I leave a bunch of empty space with just some value, like gradient, like where the light's hitting it or not hitting it. And that kind of like creates the impression in a kind of stylistic, cartoony way that there's fur or hair or feathers there. And that's how I think the easiest way to approach value is just to treat the hair or fur or whatever as one solid object and don't focus on the individual hairs or feathers or whatever. For the wings, like I'll draw like a big outline of the wing and then I'll like cut into it and shape the individual feathers like a little bit here and there, but I never really go hard into the detail if I'm keeping it in this style. Like you can keep going more and more into detail, but it's best to start off with large big shapes and just smooth gradients and then cut into outlining sections with like the dark outlines and the bright highlights, as you can see that I'm doing here for the feathers. And then it gives the impression of that shape, and then your brain kind of fills in the detail. And if you keep it simple, the detail that you do add in has more of an impact if you add less of it. And just adding some shine on the feet. And making sure that you're adding in some shadow under the claws so that it looks like it's interacting with her hand. Because if you don't do that, it might look like it's kind of floating on top of it. And I'm just adding in some shine in the feathers. Making sure I'm keeping an eye on where the light source is coming from, which is kind of above and to the side. And I'm adding in another feather because that wing didn't look very balanced. Just cutting in a little bit more darker detail on that feather. And now I'm just cleaning in some of the rougher areas and adding in some shadow on her arm so that it looks like the raven's actually sitting against her arm while it's sitting on her hand. And then I'm adding some shading under her hair with a very dark purple. And you can see what I mean by I use like a flat value and treat the hair as one large flat piece. Like I treat it as a flat gradient, and then I cut in some lines here and there and I swoop them all in the direction that the hair would be flowing over her shoulder. And I add in very dark fine lines here and there and cut in sharp detail. But I don't add like each individual hair and like a bunch of different colors of hairs, because if you add in too many individual lines in one area, it's going to look very scribbly and rough, and your brain's going to get confused and it's not going to look like hair. You need to just show people the value first, because that's what your brain notices first. It notices shading and then color, and then you focus in on detail after that. Like you don't really immediately notice the fine details. Just adding in the last few lines here, and I think the last part I have to do is to clean up the last little bit of her hair and then her hands and her arms. I think I'm just adding in some seam lines here for her glove so that it looks a little bit more detailed, and smoothing out the bottom of her elbow. You can see how I finalize it so that it doesn't look like a sketch anymore. I mean, it still has some sketchy elements, but I love that style, like I've said before. And I'm just adding a little bit more detail to her arm, and the side of her legs, and her hands. And I'm smoothing out the sketchy parts like I said before. And I'm just about done here, guys. Just the final little details. And it's gonna be a little bit, just to let you guys know before my next video, I am going on vacation, and I've been working a lot recently before this. That's why it's been a little bit since my last video. But I promise after that, I'm gonna start posting a little bit more regularly if I can, as long as work's not too crazy. I do have a real job to worry about, so sorry about that, guys. But I'm just finishing the last little details of her hands here. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it was informative to you and helped you out somehow. And if not that, I hope that at least you were inspired a little bit, and that it could help you get into a creative mood or get relaxed, or maybe even try yourself at some of these techniques that I've tried here in this video today. If you like what you saw, give my video a like, please. And if you want to see more, I have a bunch of different social media: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. Go check me out there. And subscribe to my channel for more, please. Hope you guys have a great day.